The guy that bought those boots off the dark web could actually seriously be in danger, and here's why.
For those of you that don't know, I bought some shoes off the dark web, and last night I figured out that the heel on one of them was hollow, and it had this in it. Here's what I know. That chip is called an A9G. Here's a GPS, and that is a cellular antenna. It also, importantly, has a SIM card.
Now, like I said in the other video, I have no idea if this is real. This could all be like a fake internet story that he's made that's like follow along. Those are fun, right? If this is real, he is not as scared as he should be. Somebody from the dark web is tracking you with shoes they sent you that were most likely on somebody who is now dead. If I found out that I was being tracked, I would be having a panic attack and lock myself in the house. So I don't know how he's doing this. Like, he's not concerned at all, which is why I'm teetering towards this isn't real and it's all like an internet story. But like, should he not be more terrified?
One of Jeffrey Epstein's victims was just found dead, and she allegedly took her own life. This was Virginia Giuffre, and she played an instrumental part in helping bring Epstein's crimes to light. And just today, she was found dead only weeks after being hit by a vehicle and claiming she had only a few days left to live. This was the photo that she shared on her social media after her accident, and her cryptic post alarmed people. So Virginia is deeply tied into the entire Epstein story. She was a victim of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's early on, and she was actually recruited into their sex trafficking ring at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. She was approached while she was working there by Ghislaine Maxwell, and eventually found herself being trafficked by her and Epstein. Now, Virginia's most infamous accusations were leveled against Prince Andrew from England, and she claimed that she was forced to do things with him when she was just 17. She also made a lot of different allegations about a lot of different powerful men, but we'll save those for another time. Virginia dedicated her life after coming out with all of this information to fighting and advocating for victims of child sexual abuse and sex trafficking. And back in 2019, just one day after court documents were unsealed involving Ghislaine Maxwell and Virginia Giuffre, that was the day when Epstein was found dead in his prison cell. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Obviously, my thoughts and prayers are with Virginia's family, but this is just absolutely horrific and shocking news.
Let's talk about some Disneyland ghost stories. Okay, so the Matterhorn is apparently haunted. In 1984, a woman named Dolly unfortunately passed away when she fell out of her seat and was struck by another bobsled. They call this portion of the ride Dolly's Dip. A lot of cast members don't want to go over there by themselves. They hear really strange noises in that part of the ride. Definitely is a really heartbreaking story. The next ghost at Disneyland is a boy named Timmy. Now, he is the most seen ghost at Disneyland. Some cast members that I even know personally have seen or heard about Timmy. Legend has it, Timmy's mom spread his ashes in the haunted mansion, and since then, multiple cast members have seen his spirit crying in the ride. Apparently all cast members know about Timmy. The next pair of ghosts are two little girls that are seen on the walkway between Frontierland and Fantasyland. Cast members have seen two little girls in period clothing walking and laughing. They're wearing period clothing because apparently these two girls passed away in the flood that happened in Anaheim before the park even opened. These girls are apparently the farmers' daughters from that land. And lastly, Walt Disney is rumored to haunt the Disneyland Railroad. Walt Disney loved trains. Cast members who work the ride actually have a command center where they can see trains going. And at night when the park is closed, there's actually a train whistle that goes off. They see a train pop up in the command center that isn't actually there, and they always assume that that is Walt's train. Do you have any personal ghost stories from Disneyland that you want to share with me? Please let me know in the comments, and let me know if you want a part 2, because there's so many more ghost stories to share.
So Brenda Soto sent me a story, and I believe it's about the movie Candyman, but I'm not too sure, so I'm gonna read you what she sent me. I was maybe 12 years old when my older siblings decided to watch the movie Candyman. My dad went to go pick up my mom from LA, and he took my baby sister with him. We love horror at my house. We have had many supernatural experiences, so this movie was just another day for us. Well, for my siblings, because I would still get scared. They didn't let me stay in the living room with them, so I pretended to leave, but I stayed in the kitchen, and I can see CRTV from there. I screamed at one point, so they let me sit in the living room with them. After the movie, my older sister had an idea. She said, let's say it in the mirror. My brother said that's dumb if you guys think it's real. I was scared, but I wanted to be a part of the cool kids and I went along with them. My oldest sister says, let's go to my room. She had a mirror headboard. She wanted to do it in her own bedroom. We go to her room and she begins. Candyman. She said it 3 times. Nothing happened. We looked at each other and we were all relieved. My brother was like, told you it's not real. We turned off the lights and started to leave her room. As soon as the last person was out, we heard a noise and we froze because the noise came from her bedroom. We turned on the lights and started to look all over her room and we couldn't find anything. I look at the mirror and I just point at it because I'm speechless. The mirror had a crack from one end to the other, one big crack going across. My brother tried saying it was a screw, but when he said that, the lights flickered and we all booked it to the living room. My older sister had the courage to go back and she calls us back and shows us the handprint that was on her mirror. The next day, she got rid of the headboard. Yeah, I probably wouldn't even go back and sleep in that bedroom if that was me. What the heck?
We are looking right at the face of evil. Bryan Kohberger is pleading guilty to the Idaho 4 murder. This is the man who, from the start, was accused of murdering these 4 angels, and he's been maintaining his innocence for years, even though all signs always pointed to him being guilty. It made no sense for it to not be him. But this is the really sad and kind of disgusting part about all of this. We may never know the motive, and that is an intentional move. Legal experts like Caroline Polisi suggest that this guilty plea deal might be to intentionally conceal the motive in exchange for avoiding trial or the death penalty. This has made the poor families of these kids absolutely outraged, furious. Like, not only did they want the death penalty, but they wanted and they deserve to know why he did this. They are being denied the reason why behind all of the killings. You would think these kids' families would be so happy he's pleading guilty, but they're actually furious. There's a whole conversation around how Bryan Kohberger was obsessed with the victims named Kaylee and Madison. When men like Kohberger become obsessed with a woman, it's not like they're like in love with them. It's not like they're like attracted. It's like they want to own them. They want to possess them. They want to like consume them. And if this man has no conscience, this idea makes sense to him. Ending them makes sense to him. If they can't control these women the way that they want, then these women can't act freely. He has to resort to violence and ending them in order to be satisfied. And it's disgusting, it's horrible. But like, this is what he needs to do to like assert his control over them. Like, it's not like he was actually in love with them. He just wanted to have power over them. The only way he could dominate them is by ending them. Anyone who's trying to support the girls or protect the girls became obstacles to him. He had to push them out of the path so he could try to get control. And that's why he eliminated the others too. Come over here for more true crime.
I want to talk about one of the darkest videos on the internet. This is a 70-year-old video of a man suffering from rabies, and it has kind of a crazy backstory. Now, I talked about this video in an episode I just did for the Heart Starts Pounding podcast about how terrifying rabies is, but this was a video put out by the U.S. Army Medical Service in 1955. It features an Iranian man who was bitten by a rabid wolf that attacked his village. All in all, there were 29 men in this village that got rabies from this wolf. So the US Army filmed this training video over the next several days to show people what it was like when someone contracts rabies and doesn't get the vaccine in time. And one of the scariest parts of the video is right here when the man starts showing the scariest symptom of rabies, which is hydrophobia. Hydrophobia is a fear of water that is incredibly common in rabies patients. Basically, thinking about water or even looking at it causes really painful spasms in the person's throat, so it looks like they're afraid of it. And that's actually why some people used to think that rabies was demonic, because priests would throw holy water on patients and they would have these really extreme reactions to it. Eventually, after a few days, the man did succumb to the illness because rabies is almost 100% fatal if not treated with a vaccine pretty much immediately. And if you want to learn more about the history of rabies or how terrifying it is, or even some more illnesses that kind of hijack your brain, check out this episode of the Heart Starts Pounding podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
She cried on TikTok for her parents' killers to be found, but now she's been charged with the murder. It was the 20th of February 2025 in Carroll County, Georgia. In a house on Tyus Road lived 17-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick, along with her mum and stepdad Kristen and James Brock and her 6-year-old little sister. On the day in question, the 6-year-old child made a literally traumatizing discovery. The child entered her mum and dad's bedroom to find they were both shot to death in bed. Terrified, she ran to alert her teenage sister, who then called the police. This obviously absolutely stunned the local community. They couldn't figure out who on earth would have wanted to do that to a seemingly normal family. Sarah seemed devastated, as you can see from the TikToks that she was posting. She started desperately trying to find out who did this to her parents. She posted sobbing photos saying that she missed her mum. She was sharing screenshots of news reports and even posting pictures of her mum and stepdad, saying how much she missed them. One of the TikToks said that she feels like she's living in a horror movie that never ends. Quote was, "I'm so confused on how someone could have done this and even more confused on why." She was posting pictures of her mum, calling her her ultimate inspiration and best friend. She was also posting really weird TikToks of like creepy music and her old family home, which I just feel isn't really a very normal thing to do if you're genuinely going through grief. I don't think I'd be thinking, oh, let's find some creepy music and do a TikTok about this. Well, she recently handed herself in to police. Authorities confirmed Sarah voluntarily turned herself in and showed up to the station with her biological dad. I don't know whether she just knew that they had quite a lot of evidence, because authorities claimed that they had a, quote, huge amount of evidence against her, including digital evidence. So I presume this is like text messages, Google searches, stuff on her laptop maybe. She now faces multiple charges, including murder.
Do you even know that you can be poked with something, like pricked with something, and then get possessed after? Scary story time. So there's this girl, and she's from Kenya. When you're in Kenya as a kid, you know that you can see things like cannibals, spirits, and witches and stuff, like the usual. They are basically taught the same thing that I told you guys I was taught growing up in Haiti. Like, don't answer to your name being called. Do not open the door if no one's outside the door. Anyways, when she was younger, she used to go visit her hometown with her mom, her grandma, and her siblings. And it was always so beautiful, and she always had so much fun. And often her mom would leave her with her grandma so she can go catch up with some of her people. Their family owned a house with like tons of land and like tons of people that lives nearby. So their grandma used to always let them play in the field. And she's 7 at this time. And as they were playing on the field, there was always this old woman just staring at them, looking very much angry. And so one day they were playing in the fields, and there she was, staring at them, looking angry. Her being a 7-year-old, she smiled and waved at the old lady. And when she did that, it's like she made that lady even angrier, like real angry, to the point where she tossed something into the field. Now, thank God that Grandma noticed that. And Grandma immediately told them, don't go over there and don't touch that. Stay away from it. But y'all know what they did? They went over there anyway. When they got over there, they noticed that the thing that she tossed was a really big bone. And she said it was the biggest bone she'd ever seen before, almost like a leg. So they just assumed that it was like an animal, and they walked away from it. Anyway, the next day they went to the supermarket with their grandma. She's sleepy, y'all, so I gotta give her cuddles. And as they're at the supermarket, guess who they run into? That same lady, except this time she doesn't look angry. If anything, she looks like she's in a great mood. And so her 7-year-old self took that as an opportunity to try to apologize to the lady, because she's always so angry. Now that they caught her in a good mood, they want to apologize. So she apologizes for both her and her brother. And the lady's like, oh, don't worry about it. That's okay. Can we hug it out? And her 7-year-old self knows better. And so she is about to say no. But before she even got the chance to say no, the lady hugs her anyway. And when that lady hugged her, she instantly felt something poke her in her back, like a toothpick or something. For those of you that might not know, but in Kenya and also many other cultures, if somebody puts a toothpick that pokes you in your back, it's related to witchcraft. So after she pokes her, she starts to wave her hand at her in like a ritual way. And as she's doing this, that's when Grandma notices. And when Grandma caught on to what was happening, she looked like she was about to faint.
McDonald's ghost stories. I was working a late shift cleaning up the restrooms after a busy Friday night. While I was wiping the baby changing area, I heard a strange moan come from one of the stalls. I was the only person in the restroom. I checked the stall to see if it was an animal or something, but nothing was in there. I turned around, and in the mirror I saw the reflection of a woman, just her head and torso floating. She was trying to talk to me, but it sounded all garbled and I couldn't hear what she was saying. I ran out of that bathroom so fast. Dude, what? Why is this lady hanging out in the bathroom of a McDonald's? Here's another one. I was a maintenance worker at McDonald's. One of my tasks was cleaning and repairing the playland area. One night I was climbing through the slides and the tunnels and heard a child's laughter echo through the crawl space. It was weird because the restaurant was closed and I was there alone, but I thought it was maybe coming from outside. I turned the corner and saw a little girl in a pink sweater go down the slide by herself. I checked the bottom of the slide to see if she came out of it, but there was no one there. There was a tragic accident a few years back on the road next to our building that involved a family. I always wondered if she was involved in that. I have never seen her since then, but I always feel a presence watching over me. That's really sad. Okay, last one. There is a ghost of a former customer who haunts our location. What? She was an older lady who would come here all the time. All of our employees see her when the restaurant is empty, usually in the early mornings. Her figure sits in one of the booths. She doesn't say anything and only stays a few seconds before her figure vanishes. I still don't know to this day why she chose to haunt this place. Maybe she just loved the food that much. I mean, same. She's not evil though, it's just a little startling sometimes. Do you have a ghost story at a McDonald's or any fast food establishment? Let me know in the comments.
A lot of people don't realize that rest areas can be haunted too. Now, one of the most haunted rest areas in the United States sits between the border of Idaho and Montana on Interstate 90. It's this beautiful rest area that even has individual private stalls. However, it is very creepy. In fact, in 2021, there were 2 students who went out hiking right next to this rest area, and their bodies were found several weeks later. They had apparently committed suicide. And this place is notorious for strange things happening. Now, one story that I heard from this rest area was there was a truck driver, and he pulls in one night, and he thinks it's odd because he notices like there is no vehicles there at the rest area. He's the only one there. So he gets out of his truck and starts heading towards the building to go use the restroom when he sees a person staring out the window. And the person just turns and then just walks away. So he gets inside the building and he finds one of the private stalls and he goes in there and closes the door and everything. And as he sits down, right, about 20, 30 seconds later, he hears, the door jiggling and someone's trying to get in the door. And he's like, hey, I'm in here. And it stops. And about, another 20, 30 seconds later, it starts again. Someone's trying to get in there. So he pulls his pants up and runs to the door, opens it, looks, there's absolutely no one there. He goes outside to the rest area. There's no cars there yet. And he looks around the entire parking lot. No one's outside. Well, he sits in his truck and waits until someone else comes. And it happens to be another truck driver. And he sees this truck driver get out of his vehicle. He goes inside. And about a couple minutes later, this truck driver comes running out with a scared look on his face. So he waves this truck driver over to his truck. And he's like, hey, did you have something weird happen to you in there? And the guy's like, I'm leaving. I was in the bathroom and there was a woman standing in the mirror, but she wasn't in the bathroom. So he, gets in his truck. This guy gets in his truck and they get out of there. And that's just one of the many creepy things that happen at this rest area. There's another story about a rest area in Kansas. Now, this guy, he's driving. It starts to get late. He's getting a little tired. And he's on kind of this back rural highway. And he's like, I need to get off the road and get some sleep. So he sees a sign for a rest area. And he pulls in off the interchange and starts driving up to this old-looking rest area from the 50s, 60s kind of look. And he notices all the vehicles that are parked in the parking lot are vehicles from like the 50s and the 60s. And he's like, is there some kind of retro thing going on today or something? So he gets out and he notices there's all these people there, but they're all kind of just wandering around aimlessly, almost like they're, zombies. And they're just kind of, walking really strange. So he goes inside this old building and there's a woman in there and she's turned around. And he goes up to this woman, he taps her on the back. And he says, is there like some kind of retro thing going on in town? She turns around and that's when he sees that she has no eyes. And he's freaked out at this point. He runs out, gets in his car, and starts driving as fast as he can. And as he's leaving the interchange, his tire gets damaged on the curve. And a couple miles down the road, he ends up having to pull over and call a tow truck. Now, the tow truck comes, and they get him all hooked up to the truck. The tow truck driver's like, where did this happen at? And he goes, at the rest area a couple miles back. And the truck driver, the tow truck driver looks at him and is like, there is no rest area around here for 80 miles, so I don't know what you're talking about. And so after he gets his vehicle fixed, he drives back to this rest area, except where the rest area should have been, it was just a big open field, and it looked like something had been there before, but it was torn down. And these are some of the creepy stories at rest areas across the United States. This story takes place near Joplin, Missouri. There was this man who had lived in this farmhouse for 24 years. And he said, one day it was starting to get late. He was finishing up some work in one of his fields. As he was on the tractor, he said he sees this bright light hovering over the tractor. And he said, it was just this big orb of light. And he said it just sped past him really fast and just took off into the sky. And at the time, he said, just something about it seemed really, really off. So he said later that night, he got the dogs inside and, he was getting ready to go inside for the night. But he said he just remembered like the air was really, really stale. Like there was just something off. So he goes inside the house and he started cooking some dinner. And he said he remembered there was like this heavy wind whipping against the house. And he said, it must be ready to storm or something because I could feel the wind like almost rattling and shaking the home. But the odd thing was when he looked out the window, he said all the trees, the cornfields, everything was just completely still. So he's like, where is that sound of the wind coming from? Right at that moment, he hears a bang at the front door, like someone's knocking. So he goes immediately to the front door. And when he opens the door, he said there was a man standing right on the porch. And he described him as looking like, Abraham Lincoln, wearing clothing from like the 1800s. He had this big top hat on. And he said he just had this very pale white face. And he said the man didn't move. He just kept his head straight and he was staring at him the whole time. Now, he kept asking him, like, what do you want? Why are you here? Like, what do you need? The guy would not respond. And he said eventually he was like, all right, you know what? I'm shutting the door. You need to leave. Obviously, you don't want to answer me. So he closed the door. And he said when he looked out the window, this guy was gone. So later that night, he's in bed. And he said once again, he could hear the sound of like a heavy wind whipping against the house. But when he looked out his bedroom window, the trees were completely still. And all of a sudden, he said he heard his front door like open. And at the time, he thought, the wind must have blown the door open. I must have not closed it all the way. So he gets up out of bed. He heads towards the front door. And he said when he got to the front door, it was wide open. And there was like no wind outside. So he closed the door. And he said when he turned around, he heard kind of like just this weird sound. And he said when he looked up on the ceiling, there was the man that was standing on his porch, hanging from the ceiling by all fours, looking down at him. And he said the next thing he remembered, it was morning time. He was in his bed. And he said for the next couple of days, he just felt really, really ill. And he felt like something was wrong. And all of a sudden he got better. But he said still to this day, he didn't know what he had encountered.
Real Disney Ghost Stories sent in by you guys, part 2. Now, in honor of the new Haunted Mansion movie preview coming out, I'm going to talk about the resident ghost in the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, Timmy. For those of you who don't know about Timmy, he is one of the most seen ghosts at Disneyland, specifically by the Haunted Mansion. Allegedly, his mom spread his ashes there in the 90s. There are so many stories that Disney cast members and Disney guests have sent me about Timmy. Here are a few. This Disney cast member would like to remain anonymous. I was in the mansion line before dark. It was slow, so the line went straight into the building by then. I was picking trash from the back sideline when I felt a tug on the left sleeve of my jacket. I thought it was a guest that needed help, so I even said, "Hi, can I help you?" And as I looked up, no one was there. I thought maybe someone was messing with me. As I looked over to where that person might have gone, nothing. I continued looking through the flower bed, but then as I thought about it a few seconds, I literally felt like the weirdest sensation, like all the blood from the top of my head down drained, and I felt very cold. When I got back to our locker area, everyone said I looked extremely pale and spooked. I explained to a few what happened. I've been seeing a pattern in the messages I've been getting, and a lot of people report feeling a tug on their clothing by the Haunted Mansion or someone pulling their hair. This one's from a Disney patron who was at New Orleans Square, which is where the Haunted Mansion is. We were coming through New Orleans Square. My 8-year-old was walking next to me, and I had my 2 girls in a side-by-side stroller. My teenager was on the other side of me and their dad was right behind us. We were the only family coming through the area. Suddenly, my 8-year-old says to me, "Mommy, where did that little boy just go?" It took me a minute, but it did register that a little boy went running past us, but there was no one with him. He disappeared. He was gone. He was not ahead of us. He literally disappeared into nowhere. There were no other people anywhere except far ahead of us. Chills went down my spine. I asked my son if he saw where he went, and he said, "No, he just disappeared into nowhere." I asked my teenager and their dad if they saw him, and neither one of them did. It was just my son and I. This Disney cast member would also like to remain anonymous. One night I was checking the ballroom area of the mansion. It was dark and I shined my flashlight around the room. Out of the corner of my eye I saw a figure of a boy standing with a red cap on. It didn't look like maintenance to me. I was new here at the time and asked one of my coworkers about what I saw. He said that it's just Timmy. I was like, who is Timmy? And I found out that he's the resident ghost of the haunted mansion. I have seen him a couple times since then, but he is harmless. Okay, last one. I'm a cast member, but I took my sister for her birthday to Disneyland. I've told her about Timmy in the past, and she wanted to see if she could find him in the haunted mansion. We were in the buggies at the end of the ride where the mirrors are, and she said, "Timmy, where are you?" We both looked in the mirror in front of us, and we saw a faint figure with a red hood on. The sound in our buggy also started to malfunction. Do you have a Disney ghost story to share? Let me know in the comments. And if you're a Disney cast member, I will always make sure you remain anonymous.
In this crime case, the so-called murderer turned out to be one of the victims and the child eyewitness turned out to be the murderer. It was the 20th of October 2007 in Brighton Township, Ohio. 15-year-old Daniel Petrick, or Danny to friends, lived with his parents Mark and Susan and went to school in Wellington. He was a pretty well-liked boy. His friends said that he was fun to be around, he was a happy child, and he seemingly had a good relationship with his parents. He had a sister Heidi, but I believe that she was older and didn't actually live in the family home anymore. She was married. And things were all kind of going okay in Daniel's life until he went on a ski holiday the year prior. Now, he sustained a nasty accident and this caused him to have severe spinal damage and a very bad infection. And this meant he was pretty much housebound while he recovered from this. So he did what any teenage boy would do if they were cooped up in their bedroom, couldn't leave, and they were bored. He turned to video games. Now, specifically Halo is the game that he chose. I'm actually a Sims girl myself. I'm not too familiar with Halo, but it seems kind of like a Call of Duty vibe. He started getting really obsessed with Halo and would play it hours and hours on end, but like many parents, his parents didn't really agree with the violent video games. They were getting understandably concerned about the amount of time he was spending on these, and they tried to reduce the amount of time, but it was met with a lot of resistance from Daniel, and he kind of would always end up just going around to his friends' houses and playing it there, so they felt kind of powerless at some point. Daniel's addiction to the game got so bad that his dad decided to confiscate the disc and put it in a locked safe along with his gun. Daniel was pretty outraged by this. He, as I said, was able to continue to play the game at his friend's house, but he wanted his own copy of the game back. He really felt that this was unfair. So on the day in question, roughly a week or so after his dad had hidden the disc, Daniel located the key to the safe. He opened the safe and took out the game along with the weapon. He then made his way into the family lounge where his parents sat unsuspectingly. They were just innocently watching TV, and he told them to close their eyes because he had a surprise for them. Suddenly, he pulled out the weapon and shot both his dad and his mum in the head. He then placed the gun in his dad's hand to make it look like this was a murder and self-unaliving. He expected that they would both die, and this was just the narrative that he was going to put forward. But he was wrong. His dad was clinging to life. He actually recalled seeing blood pouring out of his own skull. Just moments later, Daniel's sister, Heidi, turned up with her husband, Andrew. Now, the pair were coming round to watch something on the TV, I think some kind of sports game with the parents, but they'd actually turned up a little bit early and caught Daniel unaware. Upon seeing the hideous scene, Heidi rang emergency services immediately. She said to the operator she didn't know what happened, but both of her parents were shot. And Daniel had tried to cover his tracks by saying to Heidi that the parents had been arguing, they'd been fighting, almost like trying to paint the scene in a different way. Daniel then fled the scene, which just made him look even more suspicious. Tragically, Susan did pass away from her injuries, but by some miracle, Mark was still alive. He lost some of his jaw, but medical teams scrambled together and worked wonders on him and literally saved his life. Daniel was tracked down and arrested, and despite, like I said, trying to paint the picture to look totally different, trying to change the narrative, he actually got found to be the murderer. Thanks to his dad surviving, his dad was able to really tell the story of what actually happened. Daniel was convicted of aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, and tampering with evidence. Because of his age, he was sentenced to 23 years with the possibility of parole.
Am 2. März 1998 macht sich die 10-jährige Natascha auf den Weg zur Schule. Ein Weg, der etwa 10 Minuten lang ist. Kein weiter Weg und ein Weg, den sie jeden Tag läuft. An diesem Tag wird sie aber entführt und sollte die nächsten 8,5 Jahre in Gefangenschaft verbringen. 3069 Tage. Ich poste auf dieser Seite regelmäßig True Crime Content. Wenn ihr True Crime liebt, ist die Seite für euch. Ihr findet unter diesem Video meine Playlist, wo ihr alle meine Fälle seht. Deswegen checkt die gerne ab. Wir sprechen heute über Natascha Kampusch und ist der Fall, der sich am meisten gewünscht wurde. Und deswegen tun wir das heute. Natascha Kampusch wurde am 17. Februar 1988 in Wien geboren und lebte gemeinsam mit ihrer Mutter. Ihre Eltern waren zu dem Zeitpunkt der Tat bereits einige Jahre getrennt und sie hatte 2 ältere Halbschwestern mütterlicherseits, die aber 19 und 20 Jahre älter waren als sie. Um 7 Uhr morgens am 2. März 1998 verließ sie die Wohnung und machte sich auf den Weg zur Schule. Der Weg war eine Strecke von 900 Meter und an sich nichts Besonderes, da sie diesen Weg jeden Tag alleine lief. Natascha hatte vorher eine Auseinandersetzung mit ihrer Mutter. Sie ließ sich aber davon nicht aus der Ruhe bringen und machte sich auf den Weg zur Schule. Sie hoffte wahrscheinlich später, es mit ihrer Mutter klären zu können, wozu es erstmal nicht kommen sollte. Der Schulweg war wie gesagt 900 Meter lang. Nach 600 Meter bemerkte Natascha, dass ein weißer Transporter ihr folgte, ihr hinterherfuhr. Und dieser Transporter bzw. der Fahrer versuchte mit ihr zu sprechen und hielt an. Natascha ignorierte das und lief weiter. Irgendwann fuhr der Transporter ihr hinterher, fuhr weiter in ihre Richtung. Er stoppte und zerrte sie in den Wagen und Natascha konnte in diesem Moment nichts machen. Sie meinte in einem Interview, das gibt's auf YouTube, dass sie versuchte zu schreien. Sie versuchte einen Ton von sich zu geben, aber sie war in diesem Moment so überfordert und so schockiert, dass nichts rauskam. Dieser Mann fuhr dann mit Natascha weg und es sollten 8 Jahre vergehen. 8 Jahre, wo sie keinen Kontakt zur Außenwelt hat. Bei diesem Mann, der den weißen Transporter fuhr, handelte es sich um Wolfgang P., einem 36-jährigen Ingenieur, der diesen Tag geplant und vorbereitet hatte. Wolfgang P. fuhr dann mit der 10-jährigen Natascha nach Straßhof an der Nordbahn, ungefähr 25 Kilometer von Wien entfernt, zu sich nach Hause. Dort parkte er in der Garage, wickelte Natascha in eine Decke und trug sie dann mehrere Räume weiter in das Verlies. Er hatte ein Verlies gebaut, wo er geplant hatte, Natascha festzuhalten. Dieser Raum bzw. diese Zelle, die er für sie vorbereitet hatte, war von außen nicht sichtbar. Die befand sich hinter einer Stahltür und war ca. 5 Quadratmeter groß, hatte keine Fenster und sehr scary. Irgendwann ist es dann 8 Uhr morgens, der Unterricht hat bereits begonnen, die Lehrerin hat keine Entschuldigung von Natascha vorliegen und Natascha sollte eigentlich da sein. Daraufhin kontaktiert sie ihre Mutter. Ihre Mutter wusste ja, dass Natascha sich auf den Weg zur Schule gemacht hat und jetzt ist sie nicht da, sie macht sich Sorgen und geht sofort zur Polizei. Bei der Polizei erzählt sie dann, dass sie vorher einen Streit hatten und die Polizei nimmt das Ganze nicht so ernst. Die Polizei sagt, ja, dann ist sie wahrscheinlich weggelaufen und die erste Suche verläuft schleppend. Erst einige Stunden später wird dann angefangen, Nachbarn zu befragen, Zeugen zu befragen, irgendwie die Straßen abzulaufen und zu schauen, ob sie sich irgendwo versteckt haben könnte. Und dann gibt es Zeugen, die aussagen, dass sie einen weißen Lieferwagen beobachtet haben. Und das ist ja der entscheidende Beweis. Und es gibt eine Liste von Menschen, die einen weißen Transporter fahren. Und auf dieser Liste steht Wolfgang P. auch drauf, aber die Ermittler finden, er ist zu unauffällig und gehen diesen Hinweis einfach nicht nach. Und ich denke mir dann so, hätte man in diesem Moment es schon ernst genommen, hätte man sie wahrscheinlich viel früher schon finden können, aber so passierte es nicht. Die ersten Jahre der Gefangenschaft waren von psychischer Kontrolle geprägt. Sie durfte nur essen, wenn er es sagte. Sie durfte nur schlafen, wenn er es sagte. Sie durfte nur mit Erlaubnis auf Toilette gehen. Sie musste ihn Herr nennen. Alles, was er sagte, musste genauso passieren. Und wenn es nicht so passierte, wurde sie bestraft. Redete ihr Dinge ein wie, es sucht keiner nach dir, keiner will dich wiederhaben, es lohnt sich gar nicht für dich wieder rauszugehen, die Welt ist gefährlich und die Welt ist düster da draußen, also so Sachen, dass sie sich damit abfinden wollte und einfach dort bleiben wollte. Und ihr müsst euch vorstellen, sie war zu dem Zeitpunkt 10 Jahre alt, irgendwann war sie 11, irgendwann 12, aber sie war immer noch ein Kind. Es wurde auch ihr Aussehen kontrolliert, wann sie wie viel essen durfte und das hatte natürlich auch Auswirkungen auf ihr Gewicht. Teilweise musste sie ihre Haare abrasieren und er versuchte jeden Bereich ihres Lebens zu kontrollieren und sie für sich zu haben. Im Laufe der Jahre durfte sie sich auch frei im Haus bewegen, sie durfte in die Wohnung rein, sie durfte Fernseher gucken, sie durfte auch in den Garten, aber das immer unter sehr strenger Aufsicht. Und ihr wurde immer Angst gemacht, dass wenn sie was versuchen würde, ihre Familie umgebracht werden würde, sie umgebracht werden würde. Was ich an diesem Fall auch richtig krass finde, ist, dass Natascha so Überlebensmechanismen entwickelt hat in ihrem Kopf, dass sie zum Beispiel gesagt hat, das hat sie dann später in Interviews gesagt, dass wenn sie Essen bekam, dass sie sich das so vorstellte, dass sie in einem Restaurant ist und dass sie serviert wird und dass sie das ein bisschen so umspielt hat, dass sie sich besser fühlt und einfach besser damit klarkommt. Und irgendwann war es dann auch so weit, dass sie ihn als Bezugsperson wahrgenommen hat, weil ich meine, das war die einzige Person, die mit ihr war und die einzige Person, die sie gesehen hatte in Jahren. Und irgendwann entwickelte sich eine Art Beziehung, also natürlich keine romantische Beziehung, aber eine Beziehung halt. Diese Beziehung, diese Bindung nennt man dann auch Stockholm-Syndrom. Ich kann es jetzt nicht richtig ausführen, weil ich nicht Psychologie studiert habe, aber falls es jemand erklären kann, könnt ihr das gerne in die Kommentare machen. Fragt euch jetzt vielleicht, wurde Wolfgang P. niemals kontrolliert oder sein Haus durchsucht oder so? Und das ist sogar passiert, die Ermittler waren da, aber sie haben das ziemlich oberflächlich gemacht und wie ich ja schon gesagt habe, war das Verlies sehr unauffällig. Da waren viele Türen dazwischen, eine Stahltür, dann noch eine Tür, dann noch eine Tür und die Ermittler haben einfach nichts gefunden. Natascha verbrachte 8,5 Jahre, also wirklich im Alter von 10 bis 18 in Gefangenschaft. Ich finde das einfach so krass, wenn man drüber nachdenkt, dass sie wurde nicht mal wirklich festgehalten, also im Sinne von gefesselt oder so, sondern sie durfte raus, aber ihr wurde psychisch so viel Druck gemacht, dass sie sich einfach nicht traute zu gehen. Bis zum 23. August 2006. An diesem Tag sollte sie das Auto von Wolfgang putzen und das machte sie öfter. Was aber dieses Mal anders war, war, dass Wolfgang sie nicht beaufsichtigte. Er bekam einen Anruf und ließ sie kurz alleine und in dieser Zeit rannte Natascha direkt zum nächsten Haus. In diesem nächsten Haus wohnte eine ältere Dame. Sie erzählte kurz die Situation und sie rief sofort die Polizei. Einige Minuten später war die Polizei vor Ort. Als die Ermittler dann da waren, erklärte sie, dass sie Natascha Kampusch ist, das Mädchen, das vor 8,5 Jahren entführt wurde und verschwunden war. Und das konnte dann später mit einem DNA-Test bestätigt werden. Ganz Österreich wusste, dass Natascha wieder da war und dem Fotografen, der das erste Foto von ihr machte, wurden 1 Million Euro geboten. Das zeigt einfach, wie publik und wie berühmt, wenn man das so sagen kann, dieser Fall war. Ziemlich schnell bemerkte Wolfgang, dass Natascha nicht mehr da war und er wusste, dass eine Flucht nichts mehr bringt. Also fuhr er an den Bahnhof Wien Nord und legte sich dort auf die Gleise, wartete, bis ein Zug kam und starb. Dadurch, dass er nicht mehr lebt, gibt es keine Antworten auf die Fragen, wieso, warum Natascha, war es ein Zufall, war es geplant, warum sie und war er alleine an der Tat beteiligt. Natascha hat dann später auch ein Buch veröffentlicht, wo sie über ihre Gefangenschaft spricht und alles im Detail erklärt und erzählt.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
I got my snacks, so get yours, cause what? I gotta push my nose ring back in. Leave me alone. Whatever. But can you imagine getting witchcraft done on you through your own wig? Yeah. Well, there's this girl. Let's call her Lily. So Lily's birthday's coming up. So of course she want to look good for her birthday. She got her this really nice wig. She found this stylist on Instagram that does really good. Like her installs eats. Anyway, she gets her wig, she hits up the stylist, she books the stylist. The stylist tells her that she has to drop off her wig, like, way before her install. And she's like, okay, cool, because she wants her wigs customized because the stylist, her installs eat. So boom, she drops off the wig, she meets the stylist, she's really nice. And she's, like, super excited because she's about to look good. So the day before her birthday, that's the day that she booked. She goes to get her hair done. She gets there. Stylist is really nice. Place is really nice. She sees her wig and her wig looks good. So she's excited. Like she's about to be a bad bitch for her birthday. Gets her install. It turns out really nice, really cute. She leaves very happy. The next day was her birthday and she had a birthday dinner planned for the next day. She also had like other appointments for the rest of that day, like nails and stuff like that. So she went and got that done. And towards the end of the day, she started to get a headache. But she didn't really think much of it because she did just get her hair done, so the braids are probably kind of tight. So she doesn't really mind the headache. She just takes some painkillers that night before she goes to sleep, hoping that, you know, it'll work. Tomorrow she'll be fine. Tomorrow's her birthday. So the day comes, it's her birthday. She's excited. Everybody's wishing her a happy birthday. However, she noticed that the painkillers that she took isn't really working because her headache is getting worse. But she's not trying to let that ruin her birthday. It's her birthday. So her dinner reservations were set for about 6 o'clock. But by the time it got to 6 o'clock, her headache was literally unbearable. But it's her birthday, and this is her birthday dinner, so she doesn't even want to touch her head. So she goes to the dinner. She is in pain. like to the point where she like started to cry. And when she's like tries to feel her head and feel the braids under, because she even tried to like oil it, the braids didn't seem that tight. Like she was touching it, there was definitely a little bit of space in between, so it wasn't really that tight. But why does she have a headache that much? Because at this point it's not even a headache anymore, it's a migraine. So she's like, maybe it's one of the products that she used, she's probably allergic to or something. So she's like, after this dinner, this wig is coming out. That's exactly what she did. After her birthday dinner, she took that wig out so fast and took those braids out so fast. But that didn't stop the headache, because the headache was there for another week. At that point, she went to the hospital. Goes to the hospital, nothing's wrong. They couldn't find no reason why she had this migraine that's so bad. She wasn't allergic to anything, nothing. It wasn't until she was talking to one of her friends one time, and she was explaining how this headache, like she just can't get rid of it ever since she got her hair done. And the friend was like, oh, who did your hair? And she showed the friend the stylist Instagram. And the friend was like, oh, I'm surprised she even did your hair. She don't even like you like that. The girl's like, what? What do you mean? Like, I don't have no beef with this girl. I don't even know her. The friend is like, oh, you do know her. You just don't remember her. She's from our high school. She went to school with us. Lily's like, she did? Friend is like, yeah, she definitely went to our high school. Didn't notice her because y'all didn't have any classes, but she definitely went to our school. And she doesn't like you. Lily's like, why doesn't she like me? I didn't do anything to this girl. Now, a little background. Lily was very popular in high school, like popular girl. But the thing is, she wasn't a mean popular girl. She was one of those nice ones. Her current boyfriend is her high school sweetheart. It turns out, old girl, stylist, had the biggest crush on her boyfriend from high school. She had plans to make a move on him right before they got together. So in her mind, she's thinking Lily stole him from her. And that's delusional, because the stylist and the boyfriend never spoke. They went to school together, but they never spoke. Upon finding this out, she's like, oh, this may be deeper than I think, because Lily's not stupid. Lily's Caribbean, so she knows about witchcraft. Lily's like, oh, I think she got me. So immediately she went to her grandmother about it. She explained the whole situation to her grandmother. Her grandmother's like, yeah, it sounds like she might have did something on you, but let me find out. Bring me the wig and I'm going to find out. So Lily gives her grandma the wig. Her grandma leaves. About 2 days later, she gets a phone call from her grandma. The wig, yes, she indeed did witchcraft on the wig. Except it didn't work the way that she wanted it to. All of Lily's hair was supposed to fall out. I mean, like bald. Was supposed to give Lily alopecia. However, that's not what happened, because Lily's Caribbean. Lily's protected. So Lily really only got like a really bad headache, which she still has at the moment. After explaining everything to Grandma, she still has the headache. Grandma tells Lily, you need to come over. I know how to get rid of the headache. Now that we know the root of what's causing the headache, because the doctors couldn't find out, we're going to take care of it. So Lily is like shocked, because she didn't even know this girl. Like, what's the point? So she goes to her grandma's house. Her grandma makes her drink this tea, and she takes this herb bath. Grandma had like all these herbs in the bath, and she had like a handful of those herbs, and she was patting her all over her head with it and all over her body. And then Grandma prayed for her right after. And I kid y'all not, after she did that, headache was gone. Lily never really confronted the girl about it. She just know like, yeah, I can't mess with you. But it just goes to show, like, people will really try to get you through anything. Make sure you guys are following me on Instagram. Yeah. If you want to send me your own stories, follow me on Instagram and send it through there. I'm going to put my ad, well, it's the same ad for all social media platforms, but I'm going to put it right here.
Am 26. März 1998 wird in Frankfurt Höchst ein 13-jähriger Junge gefunden, ermordet und verstümmelt. Wer hat ihn ermordet und warum fehlen Körperteile? Let's talk about it. Ich poste auf dieser Seite regelmäßig True Crime Content. Wenn ihr True Crime liebt, dann ist diese Seite für euch. Ich habe unter allen meinen Videos meine Playlist verlinkt, wo ihr alle True Crime Videos findet. Macht das Plus weg und checkt die Videos ab. Im Fall geht es um Tristan Brübach. Aber wer war Tristan überhaupt? Tristan wurde am 4. Oktober 1984 geboren und lebte gemeinsam mit seinem Vater in Frankfurt Höchst. Aufgewachsen war er in Unterliederbach, was auch ein Stadtteil von Frankfurt ist, in der Nähe. Aber nachdem seine Mutter verstorben war, zogen die beiden gemeinsam nach Frankfurt Höchst. Als er 10 Jahre alt war, nahm sich seine Mutter das Leben aufgrund von Depressionen. Er hatte eine schwierige Kindheit, weil sein Vater Probleme mit Alkohol hatte und seine Mutter sich das Leben genommen hatte. Somit war er mehr oder weniger auf sich alleine gestellt. Er verbrachte den Großteil seiner Zeit auf der Straße, rauchte und war wenig zu Hause. Er hatte diesen familiären Halt einfach nicht. Tristan wird insgesamt als freundlichen Jungen beschrieben. Ein freundlicher Junge, der in sich gekehrt ist und sich in der Pubertät befindet. Kommen wir jetzt aber zum 26. März 1998, der Tag, an dem alles geschieht. Gegen 4 Uhr morgens geht der Vater von Tristan auf die Arbeit und gegen 8 Uhr morgens ruft Tristan seinen Vater von einer Telefonzelle in der Nähe von seinem Zuhause an und sagt dem Vater, dass er Rückenschmerzen hatte und nicht zur Schule gehen möchte. Der Vater überredet ihn dazu, trotzdem zur Schule zu gehen und er willigt ein, macht sich dann auf den Weg zur Schule. Auf dem Weg trifft er aber einen Freund namens Boris und die entscheiden sich dazu, eine Zigarette zu rauchen und kommen dann ein bisschen später zum Unterricht. Also statt gegen 8 Uhr ist er dann gegen 9 Uhr da, zur zweiten Stunde. Ab der zweiten Stunde befindet sich Tristan dann in der Schule. Gegen 13:30 Uhr sagt er seiner Lehrerin auch nochmal Bescheid, dass er Rückenschmerzen hatte und dass er zum Arzt gehen möchte und deswegen von der Schule früher nach Hause gehen möchte. Und daraufhin nimmt er einen Bus in Richtung Frankfurt Bahnhof Höchst. Um 13:43 Uhr war er am Bahnhof angekommen und eine Zeugin sah ihn auf dem Parkplatz, wie er eine Zigarette rauchte. 3 Minuten später sah man ihn auf der Überwachungskamera eines Kiosks im Bahnhof. Und das waren die letzten lebenden Aufnahmen von ihm. Er soll dann den Kiosk verlassen haben und eine Telefonzelle in der Nähe aufgesucht haben. Er telefoniert mit seinem Vater und dieses Gespräch geht 1 Minute lang. Gegen 15:20 Uhr soll er eine Dame getroffen haben mit einem Hund und er kommt mit dieser Dame ins Gespräch und streichelt den Hund. Und das war die letzte Spur von ihm. Danach hat ihn keiner mehr lebend gesehen. Diese Frau war die letzte Person, die nochmal in Kontakt mit ihm getreten ist. Und hier verliert sich die Spur. Unter den Gleisen am Bahnhof Frankfurt Höchst befindet sich so ein Tunnel, der Unterliederbach-Tunnel. Und es ist wie so eine Fußgängerunterführung, der die Stadtteile Höchst und Unterliederbach trennt. Das ist wirklich so ein schmaler, düsternder, dunkler Tunnel, wo Leute einfach durchlaufen, um nicht über die Straßen gehen zu müssen, nicht über die Ampeln gehen zu müssen. Und Ermittler gehen davon aus, dass Tristan, sein Mörder, am südlichen Eingang des Tunnels traf. Nochmal kurz auf diesen Tunnel einzugehen. Dieser Tunnel war gruselig. Also es war ein Tunnel, wo sich Kinder oder Jugendliche gegenseitig Mutproben gestellt haben. Wer traut sich unter diesen Tunnel zu laufen? Wer traut sich da durchzulaufen? Einfach weil es ein bisschen scary ist alles. Die Ermittler gehen davon aus, dass der Täter und Tristan sich zwischen 15:30 Uhr und 15:45 Uhr am südlichen Eingang des Tunnels trafen. Daraufhin griff der Täter Tristan an und schlug so sehr auf ihn ein und würgte ihn, bis er das Bewusstsein verlor. Daraufhin durchtrennte der Täter seine Kehle mit einem Messer so tief, dass er beinahe enthauptet wurde, also dass sein Kopf ab war. Daraufhin ließ er ihn ausbluten und in der Zwischenzeit entfernte er ihm Körperteile. Er entfernte ihm Muskelfleisch an seinem Oberschenkel, an seinem Po und an seinem Genitalbereich. Und diese Körperteile wurden bis heute nicht gefunden. Gegen 16 Uhr, also ungefähr eine Stunde später, finden spielende Kinder den Körper von Tristan in diesem Tunnel. Also ihr müsst euch das so vorstellen, dass der Täter ihn ermordet hatte und dann auf so einem Betonblock, also in diesem Tunnel, einfach draufgelegt hatte. Und was mich ein bisschen gewundert hat, ist, laufen da Leute nicht durch die ganze Zeit? Also ich habe mir das so vorgestellt, dass es so ein Durchgang ist, wo Leute immer mal wieder durchlaufen, also in die eine Richtung, in die andere Richtung. Und erst eine Stunde später wird Tristan von spielenden Kindern gesehen. Kinder, die in einem Jugendzentrum gespielt hatten. Und diese gehen zurück zu dem Betreuer und erzählen ihm von dem Fund, was gerade passiert ist. Und der Betreuer nimmt das erstmal gar nicht ernst, weil sowas sich einfach surreal anhört. Und daraufhin wird erst die Polizei gerufen. Als die Ermittler dann eintrafen, war der Anblick furchtbar. Tristan lag auf dem Rücken und seine Jacke verdeckte sein Gesicht. Seine Schuhe wurden ihm ausgezogen und auf Verletzungen auf seinem Körper einfach gestellt, um die ein bisschen zu verdecken. Und er hatte auf seinem ganzen Körper Schnittverletzungen. Der Tatort wurde gründlich durchsucht. Man versuchte Spuren des Täters zu finden. Man versuchte die Mordwaffe zu finden. Man versuchte die Körperteile, die verschwunden waren. Es waren jetzt keine ganzen Körperteile, aber Muskelfleisch und einzelne Genitalien waren einfach weg. Auch der Rucksack war weg. Also der Schulranzen, mit dem er in die Schule gegangen war. Alles war weg. Und in dem Tunnel, den ich vorher beschrieben habe, floss der Bach durch, also der Liederbach. Und der Bach wurde ausgepumpt, um einfach weitere Spuren zu finden. Auch Spürhunde wurden dazugezogen. Und das war einer der aufwendigsten Ermittlungen in der Kriminalgeschichte der Nachkriegszeit. Also wurden Zeugen befragt. Es wurde auch geschaut, wer saß in der Vergangenheit mal im Gefängnis für ähnliche Delikte. Auch im Ausland wurde geschaut, okay, was für gelöste Kriminalfälle gab es schon? Und könnte es sein, dass eventuell eine Person, die damals schon auffällig gewesen war, wieder zugeschlagen hatte, aber das ergab alles nichts. Einige Zeit später findet man Schulhefte von Tristans Rucksack, also die aus dem Rucksack genommen wurden und dann verteilt wurden. Und der Rucksack an sich ist aber nicht aufgetaucht zu dem Zeitpunkt. Und da findet man Fingerabdrücke, also einen blutigen Fingerabdruck von dem Täter. Und man findet auch einen blutigen Abdruck der Mordwaffe. Allerdings kann man das einfach nicht zuordnen. Also man hat einen Fingerabdruck, aber man hat keinen Fingerabdruck in der Datenbank, zu dem das passt, wenn ihr versteht, was ich meine. Außerdem sagen Zeugen aus, dass sie ungefähr zur Tatzeit einen Mann mit blonden, langen Haaren gesehen haben, der eine Narbe an der Lippe hier hat. Ich werde auch das Phantombild einblenden. das dann daraus gemacht wurde. Aber zu dem Zeitpunkt haben sie nicht verstanden, dass hier gerade ein Mord passiert. Also man hat diesen Mann gesehen und er sah gruselig aus und die Leute, die ihn gesehen haben, sind dann einfach weitergelaufen und haben nicht weiter nachgeschaut. In diesem Fall gibt es über 21.000 Spuren, aber nichts führt zum Täter. Es haben 14.000 Männer ihre Fingerabdrücke abgegeben, 14.000 Männer, die in der Umgebung Frankfurt Höchst wohnen, die zu dem Zeitpunkt da auch schon gewohnt haben, aber man weiß bis heute nicht, wer der Täter ist. Dieser Mann auf dem Phantombild ist der Hauptverdächtigte und Aussagen zufolge habe man Tristan eine Woche vorher bereits mit demselben Mann gesehen, der ungefähr doppelt so alt ist wie er. Tristan war 13, also der Mann ungefähr 26. Man geht davon aus, dass er zwischen 20 und 30 Jahre alt war zu dem Zeitpunkt. Ein Jahr später, nach der Tat, wurde dann sein Rucksack in Niedernhausen gefunden, also etwa 25 Kilometer entfernt von Frankfurt Höchst. Und in diesem Rucksack fand man eine Deutschlandkarte auf Tschechisch. Also liegt es vielleicht nahe, dass der Täter aus Tschechien kam? Einen Monat nach der Tat meldet sich ein Mann bei der Polizei und sagt, hier ist Tristans Mörder, ich bin der Mörder von Tristan, ich bin 1,80 Meter groß, habe schwarze Haare und ich möchte mich stellen. Der Mörder, der sich als Mörder bezeichnet, sagt dann, dass er sich am Frankfurter Höchstbahnhof befindet und dort auf die Polizei warten wird. Die Polizei geht diesem Anruf natürlich nach, ist dann vor Ort, aber man hört nichts mehr von dem Mann. Man sieht ihn nicht, man hört nichts und man weiß bis heute nicht, um wen es sich gehandelt hatte. Es gibt in diesem Fall einfach so viele offene Fragen. Kannte Tristan den Mörder? War es eine Person, die er kannte? Weil wenn das stimmt und er eine Woche vorher mit der Person schon gesehen wurde, war es ein Unbekannter oder war es eine Person, der Tristan sich anvertraute? Ich meine, es kommt ja noch dazu, dass er nicht so einen familiären Halt hatte. Vielleicht war es jemand, den er vertraute. Für eine Zeit hatte man auch Armin Maivis in Verdacht, der Kannibale aus Rothenburg, einfach weil ihm Körperteile entnommen wurden. Und hat es vielleicht was mit Kannibalismus zu tun? Hatte die Person vor, diese Körperteile zu verspeisen, zu essen? Aber das konnte relativ schnell ausgeschlossen werden. In diesem Fall gibt es einfach mehr Fragen als Antworten. Dann stellt sich noch die Frage, war das eine spontane Tat? War das eine Tat aus dem Affekt? Aber hat man einfach so ein Messer dabei? Also, ich weiß es einfach nicht. Mich interessiert brennend, was ihr über diesen Fall denkt. Der Fall ist mittlerweile einfach schon 27 Jahre her. Er wäre jetzt 40 Jahre alt und würde in diesem Jahr 41 Jahre alt werden. Und das ist einfach so krank. Was ich auch extrem traurig finde, zum einen, dass sein Vater im Jahr 2014 gestorben ist und niemals die Antwort hatte, wer der Mörder seines Sohnes war. Dann noch, dass zwischenzeitlich versucht wurde, sein Grab auszugraben und die Erde wurde entfernt, die Person flüchtete dann, weil sie gesehen wurde und man weiß nicht, um welche Person es sich handelte, ob das der Täter war. Und einfach, dass die Körperteile immer noch weg sind.
Never open the door if somebody knocks in the middle of the night. So I did my hair, did not think I was gonna have to do my earrings hair. I, for the life of me, cannot make the hair stay like this. I guess because it was folded in the packaging. So the hole is their ear. So like, am I their earrings or like, are they my earrings? I'm so confused right now. So this girl in the story is really young. She's about 13 or 14 years old, and she explains that she never really believed in the paranormal. A ghost staying in a home and haunting it, or like a witch flying in the middle of the night, just seemed unbelievable to her. She does say that whenever she would hear paranormal stories, she would never be like, oh, I don't believe you. She would listen and just don't make a judgment on it. However, she just herself felt like it wasn't real. Of course, that all changed. So she's from Guadalajara and her grandparents live in Guanajuato. She explains that they live in like a little town, and anytime they want to go on vacation, it's like a 2-hour ride, but they go and visit their grandparents. So this actually recently happened last year, and she said that it was her parents, her brother, and her, and they decided to take like a week vacation to go visit their grandparents in Guanajuato. Once they entered the grandparents' little town, they actually bumped into her uncle. Her parents got out of the car, went to go talk to them, and they were like almost whispering something to each other that she couldn't hear. She says that once her parents get in the car, they look very tense, but they don't say anything to her or her sibling. They end up just driving up and getting to the grandparents' home and going inside. After being inside for a little bit and their grandparents greeting them, she had an opportunity where her and her mom were alone together. She turns to her mom and she's like, hey, I feel like you're hiding something from me. Can you just tell me what happened? You look really weird. The mom looks around and sees that the brother was a little close to them them, so she's like, let's go to the room and I'll explain everything to you. The mom explains that for the past few months, the zone where they were at was getting very dangerous and that 6 people have been ended, and it was right in front of their grandparents' home. 2 of the 6 people that were ended were children. The mom explains to her that she's not going to allow them to be outside by themselves, and actually the only reason she's telling her what happened is because she's going to need her help maintaining her little sibling and their younger son inside the house, or just keep eyes on him at all times. After having that conversation with her mom, she obviously agreed to take care of her younger brother, and everybody went to the living room and they were all just talking. It was around 1 in the morning. They were still in the living room and all of a sudden they hear somebody knocking on the front door. Because of the time, everybody just stayed very quiet, looking at each other like, who could this be? Her mom immediately gets up, goes to the room because her sibling was asleep already. She just wants to make sure he's still in there, and he is. When they initially heard the first knock, somebody had knocked 3 times. So the uncle, after a little bit that nobody was moving, gets up and decides that he's gonna go towards the front door. Right before he gets to the door, there's another 3 knocks. So the uncle actually opens the door a little bit and there's nobody on the other side of the door, so he immediately closes it and locks it again. They all go to bed. The following day, it's nighttime again. They're in the living room talking again, and again at the same time they hear 3 knocks at the front door. The uncle checked again, there's nobody again, and they just decided to call it a night and go to bed. The following night they were all already in their bedrooms going to bed when they all heard knockings on the front door, but this time nobody decided to get up. They all ignored it and they just went to sleep. And again, the same thing happened the next night. This time they were all awake again in the living room just talking, and her uncle came up with a plan. He had a feeling that whoever knocked was gonna knock again if nobody answered the door, so this time he kind of hid himself right next to the door, and he said the second they were about to knock 3 times again, he was gonna open that door and catch whoever was doing it. And he was right, because by the time they knocked again 3 times, he swings open that door to catch whoever it was, and nobody was there. Everyone was shocked that there was nobody at the door because they just heard the knock like seconds ago, so somebody should have been there. The uncle looks at them and he's like, I promise you there's nobody. He even walks out, goes to the street to look if maybe somebody ran, and he sees no one out there. Her dad ends up going outside too, and he says that there's nobody out there. He didn't even see anybody in the streets either. So they came up with a plan for the following night. They all thought somebody was playing a prank, so they wanted to catch whoever the person was. Even though they weren't allowed to go in the street, there was children allowed to be out late at night, and maybe it could be them. So 20 minutes before 1 a.m., the uncle decides to go outside. Right next to the door there is a big bush, and he was gonna hide there so that he could see who was knocking on the door. Now her dad was gonna be inside right next to the door so that they both could at least have a chance at catching who this person was. They both agreed that once they heard the knock, the uncle that was inside was gonna open the door immediately, and the uncle on the outside was gonna jump out at whoever it was. So 1 a.m. comes and there's definitely knocks at the front door. So the dad that was inside opens the door, sees the uncle standing there that was outside hiding, and they were like, well, who was it? Neither of them saw anyone at the front door knocking. The uncle that had been hiding outside actually thought that her dad was playing a prank on him. He was like, well, you knocked so that I can come out. It's you. But everybody that was inside attested to the fact that they never saw the man knock on the door. However, somebody definitely knocked on the door. The uncle that was hiding outside promised that he never knocked, and the dad that was inside also said he didn't knock. She was trying to understand everything, and she was like, what if it was like sounds from another house and we just thought it sounded like a knock on the front door? She was like, what if there was an animal? What if, the temperature changes and creates these weird sounds? Because in her mind, she's like, this is not paranormal. Like, it's something else. It's something that can be explained, but we just can't figure it out yet. So they're in like their last few days of staying there with their grandparents, and she says that she's in the living room with her grandmother. They're organizing some stuff that she didn't want anymore. She was gonna throw out, but time got the better of them and they had no idea that it was already 1 in the morning. They were so busy gossiping and organizing that when the 3 knocks came, they both just stayed in shock. She says that her grandmother looked at her and said, like, let's go to the next room, do not talk, like, let's be very quiet. So as she's about to follow her grandmother, something stopped her dead in her tracks. She saw when her grandmother was walking to like this second living room area that they had where her dad and uncle were in, but she stayed very still because she heard a voice coming from the front door. She hears,
Please Please open the door. Please help me. Please.
When she turns back to where her grandmother had turned, she notices that her grandmother had came back for her, and she thinks that the grandmother also heard the voice because they both looked at each other very much scared. And the voice came again.
Please, please open the door. Please help me.
She explains that her grandmother was frozen this time, so she just grabbed her grandmother by the hand and pulled her towards that second living room to where her dad and uncle were. So she walks in there with grandmother in hand, tells her dad and uncle what they just heard. They both jolt up, go to the front door, they go outside, and there is nobody out there. When they came back in, they started asking them like, what did you hear? What happened? And both her and her grandmother were telling them the same thing. The grandmother also told them that she did not recognize that voice, which is weird because everybody knows everyone in that small town. The following day, the grandmother actually went to her neighbor's house to see if maybe they were having these same experiences. However, they said that they weren't. She went to the neighbor after her neighbor's house, and they said that they were also hearing knockings in their front door at 1 in the morning. However, they explained to her that they were not opening that door. They never even checked. They were not about to open the door at that time for anybody. They also tell the grandmother, look, if it's a ghost, if it's a human, you do not open that door for anybody at that time. Just ignore it. She says that the last night they were going to spend with their grandparents, nobody wanted to be in the living room anymore. Everybody was in bed before 1 in the morning. So she says that she wasn't asleep yet. Nobody was, but they were in their bedrooms, and that's when her mom asked if she can go to the living room and grab something that she needed. Because it was only 12 and not 1, she was like, okay, yeah, let me go get what you needed, and she was very confident that nothing scary was gonna happen. So as she walks into the living room, she starts to hear like people talking outside of the front door, but she thought maybe it was just people in the street walking by. You know, it wasn't 1 o'clock just yet, but those like murmurs, the talking just changed into somebody crying hysterically outside of that front door. She stayed in shock to the point where she could no longer move. Like she wanted to run away from that living room and she couldn't. She kept hearing the cries get like worse and worse, and by the time she knew it, she had screamed so loud, and the first person that got to the living room was her mom. As soon as her mom grabs her, she just starts crying uncontrollably. When she finally calmed down a little bit, she told her mom that she started to hear crying outside the front door, but then the crying started to be right next to her in that living room. However, she would look around and there was no one in the living room with her. She did end up going to bed and going to sleep. She explains that she was so drained and that she didn't even want to wait until 1 a.m. to see what would happen next. The following morning, she said that they were all having breakfast and she was listening to all the adults talk about, you know, the knockings on the door. She said that she overheard when her uncle and the grandmother said that there were knockings and voices coming from the front door at 1 in the morning, but that nobody wanted to come out and see what or who that was. She said that that day they returned back to their hometown and she just wanted to forget about that experience at her grandparents' home. However, she said that recently she had talked to her grandmother over the phone, and her grandmother tells her that they are still hearing knocks and like voices outside the door even today. Her grandmother told her that they already have a priest coming to bless the homes in that neighborhood in hopes that the knockings and the voices and the cries go away. She explains that she doesn't know if maybe these are the souls of the people who had just passed away in front of her grandmother's home or what it could be, but that she really hopes they go away by the time she has to go visit her grandparents' house again. I don't even know why they would open that door the first time. My mom, my aunts who live next to my mom are always like, if you didn't invite somebody, if you're not expecting visit, do not open the door. Well, in our case, do not open the window. So, in my mom's house, we always hear knocks on the windows at night, and my aunts live right next door to my mom. They also hear knockings on the windows. So all of them have told like my cousins, obviously, and my mom tells us, if you're not expecting anybody, do not open that window. And if you've been following me for a really long time, you know that my little brother has captured that video of somebody knocking on his window and unexpectedly seeing that like little thing in the window, and it almost looks like a hand knocking on, I don't know, but like, yeah, when I used to stay there because I lived in Austin and I would come visit, I would take sleeping pills because no one's waking me up. Now that I live here, thankfully I don't have to spend the night there. I do miss it though. I do miss staying the night, and because me and my brother used to stay up all night watching scary movies and like hearing weird sounds and investigating. Anyway, what do you guys think? Obviously, do not open the door if you're not expecting anybody, but thankfully now we have Ring cameras, so no, because now I'm like, if somebody rings my door and then there's no one there,